We begin in 1974, in a house near the river in Amityville. Ronald woke up with strange visions and hearing voices saying, "Get them, kill them." When the clock struck 3:15, Ronald took his gun and started going from room to room shooting his entire family. Jody heard the shots and tried to hide in the closet with her favorite teddy bear. But it didn't take long for Ronald to find her anyway, and unfortunately determined her end after saying he loved her. This is a case that appeared in the news at the time and shook the entire nation, especially when Ronald claimed that something in the house made him do it. Sometime later, George and Kathy are happily living together as newlyweds. Kathy has 3 children from a previous relationship, and while Michael likes George, Billy and Chelsea are not fans. One afternoon, the couple goes out to look for a new house and ends up driving through Amityville, which George thinks they cannot afford. Kathy does not care, and as soon as she sees the beautiful house by the river, she calls the realtor for a visit. The house is huge, and George cannot understand why its price is so low. Kathy notices a black stain on the ceiling, but does not think much about it, and George admits that he likes the boathouse outside because it has a motorboat. There are some strange sounds in the hallway that the realtor hears but chooses to ignore, while the couple looks around the house. But when they get to the basement, she refuses to go down. The couple goes down anyway, and George finds a clock stopped at 3:15. Once the tour ends, Kathy convinces George to buy the house even if they have to eat less for a few months, since the deal is incredible. George hesitates, but accepts, only after asking the realtor where the catch is. The realtor finally admits that this is the house where the infamous tragedy happened, which makes Kathy have doubts, but George reminds her that houses do not kill people. People kill people. A few days later, the family moves into the house and has a wonderful first day together, documenting the whole process. At night, George starts to feel cold, and while Kathy does not feel it, he goes down to the basement to put more wood in the heater. There are some strange sounds that he initially thinks come from the clock radio, but it isn't even on, so he discovers it is just the wind passing through the air duct. When George returns to bed, he and Kathy start to get intimate, but George gets distracted by seeing the ghost of Jody in the room. She disappears in seconds, but George now does not feel well and ends his activities for the night. The next morning, George wakes up with a horrible cough. Kathy hears Chelsea talking to someone, and when she checks, finds the child alone. Assuming it is an imaginary friend, Kathy pretends, but Chelsea can really see the ghost of Jody living in the closet. She also drew a picture of Ronald, but does not tell Kathy who it is because Jody asked her to keep the secret. While George is outside chopping wood, Michael approaches him with a strange metal object he found in the basement. George scolds him and forbids him to go down there because it will be his office, but quickly apologizes with a hug for his reaction. Moments later, George and Kathy suddenly hear Billy's dog, Harry, barking like crazy, and follow the noise to find Chelsea dangerously standing in George's speedboat with a balloon in her hand. It takes a few attempts from her parents to get her out of there, and once they pull her out of the water, Chelsea explains that Jody just wanted to see the boat. The family returns to the house, and George makes sure to lock the boathouse. At night, strange noises wake Michael. He wants to go to the bathroom, and since Billy doesn't wake up to go with him, he tries to be brave and goes alone. As soon as he reaches the hallway, he looks out the window and notices that the boathouse is open, so he runs to the bathroom in fear. After urinating, he tries to wash his hands, but the water doesn't come out of the tap. Suddenly, a scary ghost appears next to Michael, causing the faucet to start dripping blood. Terrified, Michael runs back to his bed while around the house, furniture and windows move on their own. At that moment, George hears a gunshot and leaves the room to check on the boys, unaware that blood is now dripping from a light switch. In the boys' room, George is shocked to see himself standing next to the bodies of the children, and this repugnant version of himself tries to end his own life too. Suddenly, George wakes up and discovers everything was a nightmare happening at 3:15. He gets out of bed to close the window and notices that the boathouse is open. There is also a balloon coming out of it. Thinking Chelsea might be in there again, George runs to the boathouse and finds Harry barking at some bubbles in the water. George dives immediately, but there is nothing down there. Now Harry is barking outside, and when George follows him, he discovers Jody's face in the window, which quickly moves to appear next to Chelsea. George runs inside to check, only to find Chelsea sleeping peacefully. He then checks the closet, where he does not see Jody being held against the ceiling by scary hands. George finds Jody's teddy bear and decides to leave it in bed with Chelsea. The next morning, George is in the basement watching Harry try to dig a hole in the wall, which has a mysterious stain in its wood. When Kathy checks on him, George explains that this is the only warm place in the house because someone keeps opening the windows. He also explains that Harry woke him up, and when he mentions the boathouse, reveals he found the lock keys in Billy's room, so he thinks it was all a prank because Billy doesn't like him. 2 weeks later, George keeps apologizing to Billy, but Billy refuses to accept blame for something he didn't do. While Kathy is in the kitchen, the magnets on the fridge move on their own to spell out, "Get them and kill them." Then she hears the sound of someone running behind her, and when she turns around, discovers the scary message. Worried, she goes to look for George, but when she returns and finds him drinking milk, the message has disappeared, so she blames her imagination. Lisa used to be the babysitter for the previous family, and after the parents leave, she tells Billy the whole story. Ronald first thought his dog was evil, so he killed it. A few days later, he thought his family were demons and also killed them. She is interrupted by Michael's arrival, and as Lisa tells him to cover his ears, he ends up hearing everything anyway. Lisa explains the deaths in grotesque detail, and then shows where they found Jody. Chelsea also appears and shares that Jody says Lisa is a horrible babysitter, and it ends up being revealed that it was Jody who got Lisa fired. Billy dares Lisa to go into the closet, and Lisa does so, ignoring Chelsea's warnings that this might make Jody angry. Lisa finds Jody's teddy bear just before the door closes behind her, and the boys cannot open it from the outside, even with a shove. While Chelsea's toy displays a message saying "hate her," the lights start to flicker, and Jody appears in the closet to make Lisa touch the bullet wound that Ronald left on her forehead. Lisa screams in horror as many scary visions appear before her, and the boys run to get help. Moments later, an ambulance takes traumatized Lisa away. George yells at the boys for playing a dangerous prank, ignoring Billy when he says it was the house that did this. The boys no longer want to sleep in that room now that they know about the tragedy, but George forces them anyway. Kathy goes to check on Chelsea, who explains that Lisa was mean to Jody, so Jody hurt her. Jody also thinks Kathy is a good mother, so she won't hurt her, but hates the bad man who lives in the house and makes her do bad things. The next day, George lets Billy work with the wood until late, making him miss dinner. Kathy thinks George is overdoing the discipline, but he thinks Billy needs a firm, fatherly hand. Later, while George is fixing the basement, he hears the voices of Billy and Michael coming from the ducts, talking about how he is an idiot. He can also hear a voice telling him to grab them, destroy them, and when George touches the wall with the hole, he suddenly finds himself in a room full of strange tables with taps on their sides dripping blood on the floor. One of the tables has a body on it, and when George checks, he sees himself saying, "Kill them." Once the vision ends, he runs to the bathroom to vomit. When he tries to take a shower to relax, suddenly 2 hands appear in the water and try to drown him. He fights against the grip, screaming until Kathy finds him and helps him. The next day, Kathy takes George to the doctor, who cannot find anything physically wrong with him. George admits he started to feel better the minute they left the house, but protests when the doctor suggests he see a psychiatrist, pointing out that he is not crazy. At home, Billy is taking care of his siblings. Chelsea leaves the table to find her bear, and when her parents return, they find the bear on the floor outside. Suddenly, they hear Chelsea's voice, and when they look up, casually find her standing on the house. While George gets his ladder, Kathy rushes inside to grab the stairs and crawl out the window to follow Chelsea on the roof. Chelsea explains that she must go with Jody, but Kathy manages to hold her in time. Unfortunately, Kathy starts to slip, so George leaves the ladder and runs to grab Chelsea just as she falls. Moments later, Kathy yells at Chelsea for doing something so stupid, making her cry by saying Jody isn't real. Chelsea responds that Jody was going to take her to see her dad, making Kathy think her daughter is reacting poorly to the grief. George hears all this and says this is a crazy family, before grabbing all his things from the room and moving to the basement. Sometime later, Kathy goes to see Father Calloway to share her concerns about something evil possibly living in the house, and the priest is not surprised to hear she is living in the house of the tragedy. Meanwhile, George is chopping wood and making Billy hold the logs, even though he is scared of the axe so close to his limbs. When Billy starts to cry, George threatens him to behave. At night, George is in the basement watching the tape from Moving Day. Suddenly, he sees Billy's face becoming demonic and, thinking his mind is playing tricks, decides to sleep. At 3:15, he wakes up again to hear the voices saying, "Destroy them." So he leaves the basement and finds all the doors of the house open. Harry is barking again in the boathouse, so George grabs his axe and goes to check. As soon as he enters, he is attacked by a scary zombie-like creature and immediately defends himself with his axe. It isn't until the creature is dead that George realizes he has truly killed Harry. After hiding the body, he proceeds to clean the blood off the floor. The next morning, he cannot stop the guilt from weighing on his mind. Kathy tries to tell him they should leave the house, but George refuses while holding her hand to the point of hurting her. An argument starts, causing George to yell at Kathy, only to be interrupted by the boys coming to ask about Harry. George tells them that Harry probably ran away, ignoring Billy when he responds that his dog never does that. In the afternoon, Father Calloway comes to exorcise the house and notices Chelsea holding Jody's teddy bear, then tells Kathy privately that Jody had been buried with that bear and should not be there. When Calloway begins working, all the doors around him shut by themselves, and a noise begins to come from the air duct. Calloway checks and is suddenly attacked by a huge swarm of flies until the doors open again. Frightened, the priest runs out of the house and ignores Kathy's pleas for help as he gets into his car to leave. When Kathy turns around, she bumps into George, who reminds her he is with her. When night falls, George cannot sleep because he keeps hearing the voices and Harry's barking. The TV suddenly shows him the same visions that Ronald had seen and tells him to kill them, making George run outside to stop hearing them. Through the window, Kathy sees her husband suffering on the ground. On the 28th day, Kathy decides to go to the library to investigate the tragedy. She discovers that Ronald heard voices, that he also moved to the basement, that he killed his family after 28 days, and that police found a notebook with the same handwriting she had seen on the fridge magnets. Then, she researches the house and discovers that a reverend built it under the pretense of caring for Native Americans, when in fact he abused them by various methods, including the strange contraption that Michael had found in the basement. Kathy runs to see Calloway to share this information, and Calloway admits that he did not believe Ronald when he came with the same problem, but believes now, which means Kathy needs to get her family out of the house immediately. Meanwhile, George is finally tired of the whispers and starts tearing down the wall in the basement where the hole is. On the other side, he finds a bunch of worms and a second wall, which he also knocks down to find the room he saw in his dream. Here, George finds the ghosts of all the Native Americans that the Reverend had killed. At the end of the hallway, he finds the spirit of the Reverend himself, who recreates the night of his death. He had ended it all so that his presence could live on forever in the house, and now he can possess George. Suddenly, George wakes up and picks up the ringing phone, but as soon as he hears Kathy asking him to leave the house, he rips the phone from the wall. Kathy runs back to the house and finds George in the boathouse, searching for spirits in the water with a flashlight to get rid of them with the boat's propeller. When Kathy calls his name, he turns and blinds her with the flashlight, causing her to fall into the water. Her hair gets caught in the boat's propeller, and when George checks on her, he sees a demonic face and turns on the propeller to get rid of it. Kathy fights against the grip until George finally sees her real face and releases her. Kathy runs into the house and finds Chelsea in the basement, where they discover coffins for the whole family. George suddenly appears acting scary, making Kathy and Chelsea run away and meet up with the boys to try to escape. George grabs a gun and begins to chase them, easily pushing all the obstacles the family throws in his way. The family cannot find an exit because all the doors and windows close by themselves. And eventually George manages to catch up to them to grab and hit Kathy, only to release her when Billy hits him back. Chelsea guides the family up the stairs so they can escape through her window, which is open because it used to be Jody's. They climb on the roof, and when George appears to follow them, Billy rips a piece of metal from the chimney and hits George with it, making him fall and lose his weapon. The family then tries to re-enter the house through a different window, only to be frightened by the Reverend's ghost. They end up going down the rooftop stairs, only to discover that George woke up and retrieved his axe. He grabs Billy and prepares to kill him because he still sees him as a demon, but is suddenly interrupted by Kathy, who now threatens him with his own weapon. George challenges her to do it, but Kathy cannot bring herself to kill her own husband, so instead, she knocks him out. Visions of their happy days together flood George's mind as he wakes up and attacks Kathy with his axe, only to realize that this is also a vision. Coming to, George asks Kathy to kill him, but Kathy just knocks him out again before she and the kids tie him up. They then drag his body to the boat, where he wakes up again as the visions of tragedy flood his senses. Billy wants to leave him there, but Kathy forces her children to obey, and the whole family leaves in the boat. Once they are far enough from the house, George shows he is no longer affected and finally accepts that they need to leave for good. Back at the house, Jody screams in fear as the house rearranges itself. The clock shows 3:15 again, and two hands pull her spirit away.